Welcome to Radford Design Thinkers, a brand new podcast brought to you by Radford University. Program hosts include graduate students in the Design Thinking MFA program, whose intent is to share how design thinking is used to improve meeting outcomes, training, teaching, and general human interaction through connections in psychology and design. With that, we welcome you and hope you enjoy. Welcome to episode 4 of the Design Thinkers podcast. This is going to be a review of this series, which has been our 3 past podcasts episodes. And what we've done is each of us have taken an episode to kind of recap and just kind of bring this series to a close. So, Nancy, why don't you start off with episode 1?
Sure. So how and why did we all start this? Well, actually, it started in December of 2022. Our instructor for our course, Kathleen Sullivan, commented that our class, 4 people, that the exploration that we had done in the 2 books, Fast and Slow Thinking by Daniel Kahneman and The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman, we had captured something intriguing. So she really encouraged us to explore how can we take our understanding and build it into knowledge. So how are we going to do this? Well, by sharing our ideas. And we decided, sure, why not a podcast? None of us had any experience doing one. So the first episode, it took a long time for us to get going, but we were all engaged to try this all out. At least the 3 of us were. And so our adventure began. Mm-hmm. In exploring fast and slow thinking in episode 1, we talked about how each form of thinking works for us individually. It's not going to work the same for every person. But knowing when you're active in the process allows you to adjust your perceptions and biases to help the decision-making process. So stepping back, fast thinking, or system 1, is that intuitive or emotional thinking that we do in that moment. Slow thinking, system 2, is that deliberate and logical considering other elements or the solutions. It's not that quick, instantaneous thing. So as MFA grad students in design thinking at Radford, we wanted to connect that slow and fast thinking with design thinking, which is the process of empathizing, defining, prototyping, testing, and ideation. The connection were made through Don Norman's The Design of Everyday Things and the introduction of human-centered design. Through this, we started to explain some of the toolboxes that we used. Luma is the one that we've used here at Radford, which is a set of activities designers use to engage with human-centered design. These tools and others help us to slow our thinking down, system 2, when problem solving, allowing us to be active and not reactive in our thinking and solutions. In addressing signifiers, we noted that their application directs the user's engagement with objects and environments, allowing system 1, the intuitive mind, to engage safely. The designer's places the signifiers to help the user to map how they're going to work with the system, be it an object, environment, or even a document. Natural mapping is influenced by the person's culture, environment, and even the situation, meaning that the designer needs to understand these elements to create the signifiers needed for each situation. This takes us back to human-centered design, to understand who the end user is and what they need. It's the availability cascade that asks System 2 to reconsider the information that System 1 was relying on. We started to see how System 1 and System 2 work in collaboration with each other, and no one is better than the other, but both are needed and used as we move through our daily lives.
Episode 2, we focused a lot more on human-centered design. We talked about it in episode 1, but then we went through and tried to refine it a little bit more. And I get really excited about human-centered design. It's all these ideas that we think are happening when we're designing for people, but really a lot of times we're missing it. I've always like personally taken the time to observe how like spaces are put together, like our built environment is put together, because I find it fascinating. And it's just like, it's my comfort zone. I'm the person that looks at the bathroom in every place I go, because bathrooms are my weird thing I'm fascinated with as well. So I'm like, why did they make that decision? This is a dumb way to use the space. Anyways, my students will tell you that I do a whole thing on bathrooms in class for them. But really, for me, it wasn't until we like combined those HCD concepts with Kahneman studies that I really started to look at how human interactions are designed. So taking it from just the physical space to how like conversations are designed. And it's made me really aware. And I find myself really reflecting back on different experiences a lot more than I used to, and really kind of like deconstructing that conversation, which is both good and bad. There's a lot of hindsight bias in there as well as you go back and look, but it's really all kind of just opened up another world for me. Okay, so to provide like a little bit more in depth on what we talked about in episode 2 specifically, is that, you know, by focusing on people, we were really able to start solving the right problem. And that's what design thinking shows us very often, is how to solve the right problem, or what is the right problem, because usually we're not starting with that right problem. Human-centered design is showing us everything is connected as a system. All parts are affected by actions in some way. And very often the best way to find out something won't work is to plan to fail. So all of those kind of concepts go into human-centered design. But what Kahneman does is he really pulls back the curtain for designers on why people make the decisions that they make, you know, what impacts and influences their choices, and how all this can kind of further hone empathy skills. And my favorite way to kind of bridge these two topics is with constraints, because designers are familiar with the idea of design constraints in their work. You know, something that limits the possibilities of the design that they're working on, whether it's like, you know, like physical size or color, or maybe it's a technology constraint. Sorry, there's a bug flying by me. I was trying not to react to it, but it was like right there. So constraints are common, where we see constraints in a lot of ways, but there are other constraints that we have to consider beyond just those physical constraints of a project. You know, there's cultural constraints that pertain to language, education, and region, and those are just a few cultural constraints that we have to think about. All of these impact the overall design choice, and design choice, once again, is not just a physical object that we're designing, but also our experience that we're designing as well. So all these cultural constraints also have biases, fallacies, and illusions that are kind of manipulated by how system 1 and system 2 handle the intake of information. So there's a lot that kind of goes on behind this curtain, and that's what Kahneman is showing us. He's showing us how our mind is working a little bit more. So system 1 and system 2 in particular, system 2 is really important to success with human-centered design. It's taking a breath, slowing down your thinking, all to allow your mind kind of time to consider the events that might have led your client on the path that they've taken. You know, why did this group choose to sit in the way, you know, they did when they came in? Why did the outcomes produced by one team vary so differently than the other team in the room? Maybe why is everyone happy today? Why does the room smell like Subway? Why am I asking why? You know, things along those lines. So human-centered design is thinking about people, thinking about how people's lives, experiences, even not of their lifelong experiences, but just their day experiences, are impacting all these decisions that they're going to end up making. Now I have to take a breath. All right.
That's awesome.
Got episode 3.
Yes. So now we have recapped episode 1 and 2. So in episode 3, we talked about the experiencing self and the remembering self. And the experiencing self is what you are doing in the moment. I'm talking into my microphone, recording the podcast. For everybody listening, you're experiencing the podcast as you're out in your daily lives, doing whatever it is you're doing right now, while also listening. Your remembering self is relatively self-explanatory via its name, and that is what you remember about what you experienced. So in that episode 3, we also talked about the 3 levels of processing, which are visceral, behavioral, and reflective processing. The visceral processing is subconscious, and it works a lot with that system 1 that both Nancy and Megan have talked about. It's hard at work with our reflexes and our quick thinking, the things that we don't have to consciously think about. Behavioral processing focuses on our learned skills. We're taking our experiences and examining what has and is taking place. And then we move to the reflective level where we're forming our memories. And this is where we're fully into system 2, and we're connecting these ideas and these processes at a conscious cognitive level. So all of this information and things that we've learned from every episode is really interesting. But you guys probably sit and wonder sometimes, okay, but how does this apply to real life? How do I utilize this in my job, whether that's teaching, whether that's, managing a group of people, whether that's, whatever it might be, designing products for people. There are all kinds of really cool things that can be done with not just the experiencing and remembering self, but everything that we've talked about in this series. So one thing that I remember doing at some point in my life, so it was in a classroom at some point, was having the instructor show a video of whatever, a group of people interacting in some way. And then afterwards, you were asked a series of questions on what you just watched. And this is something that is a really good lesson for a lot of people because, when what the verdict is that most people do not remember a lot of what they just saw. We do not take in things like we think we do. We might think, oh, I would be the greatest eyewitness. Doubt it. I doubt it, because we're not as good of rememberers as what we think. But it's an interesting, those activities where you then question people about what they just saw. How many characters had dark hair, which character wore the red shirt, etc. Likely they're going to not remember, and it's a good eye-opening thing for an instructor, but also for the people participating, because it's like, oh, okay, I need to either pay attention more or be more self-aware and know that, what I think I know might not be as accurate as I think, which is okay. And then, as far as the levels of processing go, these can also be utilized to help people come up with better products. Say there's a product being designed at a company and there's an alarm that goes off every 15 minutes, and the alarm is loud and just annoying. And, if you're doing beta testing, the users will have this bad visceral response, this immediate, I do not like this response. So the levels of processing can be used in the design process in so many ways. And that's one of the really cool things that we talked about in episode 3, how, some of these key terms that we focused on can really be used in a classroom, in a business setting, in a design setting, kind of across the board. So that's what I've got for episode 3.
That's what you got. Well, I hope everyone took notes over the course of this series, because it's the end of the semester, which means there has to be an exam. I'm just joking.
Sorry, no.
Do you guys have any other closing thoughts you want to add before we say farewell of this for, I guess, this season we'll see of the podcast?
It really has been taking that understanding and moving it into that knowledge state where we can now start to pull information out. Or I'm teaching a class right now. I'm standing in front of the classroom and I'm seeing myself. I have those opportunities to reflect on myself, to see how and what am I doing in that classroom. And I can now have a better analysis as I move forward to the winter semester when I have more classes to teach, or the fall semester. And I have the tools now where I can make decisions on how do I want to change? How do I want to move things? Before I think I thought, I just need to change, but what, how? These two books really gave a foundation as to what and how I can change processes and actions that I do in the classroom.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of similar kind of feelings as you did on that, Nancy. Definitely changed the way I've approached not just teaching, but just relationships in general. And I'm excited to kind of dive more into this whole topic as we keep moving along in our grad studies. So we've covered a lot in our podcast, and maybe you want to go back and listen to the whole thing again. We would love that. So feel free to hit the subscribe button here on YouTube, and you'll be notified when the next series hopefully starts, and you won't miss anything. And we look forward to many, many more episodes, and hope you come back to us.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. Radford University is in Radford, Virginia, USA, but is accessible worldwide with online programs such as the Design Thinking MFA. If you're interested in learning more about our program, please check out www.radford.edu for more information.